America, we're dying, quite literally. So what can we do about this fact? Well, we'll bring in a congressman. His name is David Schweikert. We're going to talk about it today on Equal Matters. Cal, the guitar hero, with that amazing intro. Check him out on Instagram. My name is Rob Hunter. For the past 25 years, I've been a radio talk show host. I've been studying and discussing politics, news, culture, and current events. I've covered presidential campaigns up close and personal all across this country. I've discussed tragedies and triumphs. I covered Hurricane Katrina from New Orleans. And I found that over the past 25 years, most media coverage lacks one thing in particular, and it's depth. That's where Equal Matters comes in. Equal Matters is a podcast focused on learning more about the challenges we face in our lives and that we face as a country. Along the way, no conversation's going to be off limits because the best option to change and grow is always to be honest. And the truth is, as Congressman David Schweikert might say, if we don't do anything, we don't act now, we're screwed. So what I've learned in my own life, every time I put a challenge off, that challenge only becomes harder to solve. So the sooner we take action, the easier the change is. I love this country. I fully believe in the concept of freedom, both from government and in our own personal freedom, where you are in control of your own life. More truth is that America is aging fast. So this presents challenges for all of us, you, me, everyone around us. For example, Social Security faces a 25% cut in just 9 years if we don't act now. So this is where the truth gets uncomfortable, but is necessary, especially for many politicians who avoid the truth when facing re-election. And over these years, I've interviewed dozens of politicians, many of them guarded, standoffish, playing a role every time they're in public, especially when answering tough questions. Now, one congressman I've encountered has been daring enough to tell the truth. That's this guy right here, Congressman David Schweikert. He's a friend. He's a Republican. He represents the 1st Congressional District in Arizona. He's currently in his 7th term. And for some reason, he enjoys studying these challenges that America faces and seeking out solutions. The congressman has agreed to do a series with us about America's biggest challenges. First and foremost, that America is on the cusp of dying. He joins us today on Equal Matters. Congressman David Schweikert, is America dying?
In some ways it is. And it's a really uncomfortable, because it's not the way we think. But demographics is destiny. You know, and I have no idea who said that, but so I just stole someone's patent on a saying. But the fact of the matter, the entire industrialized world is in many ways shrinking. What we call fertility rates, the number of children. So the United States is down to about 1.7 children per female. And you need to be at least 2.1 for population stability. And you get a number that keeps saying, well, immigration will take care of it. But you actually sort of look at even the immigration data, and it really doesn't get you there. What's also fascinating is first generation, second generation immigrants, their fertility rates have also crashed.
Oh, really?
So there's almost no population other than sort of Hasidic Jews, conservative followers of Islam, and even then and those are very, very, very small demographics. Why this is important is what happens when the entire industrialized world is flatline population-wise or declining. If you ever really want to see something that's fascinating, look at China's numbers. They basically, in the next couple of years, they have a little bit of a movement, and then boom, they roll over, and their curve is just a dramatic fall. And so now you get into this debate of productivity in society in the world.
And these are areas that you want to focus on as a congressman. You've been doing, you became a federal congressman in 2011. You're looking at these issues now and understanding, and this is, I guess, my way of understanding the challenges because of demographics. We have health challenges.
Yep.
Not only is an older population, it's harder to keep them. It's not harder. It's just there's resources needed.
Yeah, it's expensive.
It is. There's economic, because you have to have productivity in order to bring in tax revenues, and then there's spending implications. So why are you trying to get involved in these complex problems?
You don't just fall onto this. What happens if you actually do an honest deep dive into U.S. debt? U.S. debt is absolutely out of control. Today we're borrowing about $51,000 a second.
Is that it?
In about 9 years, we're over $90,000 a second. Almost all that growth is Medicare, the additional spending on healthcare. So, when you're running for office, the campaign managers and the consultants all say, say things like this: waste and fraud and getting rid of foreign aid, and maybe Congress shouldn't be paid, which probably shouldn't be, but a number of these things. And then you start to do the math, and you realize it's an absolute fraud. Every dime of foreign aid is about 12 days of borrowing. And what's happened is we're terrified, just absolutely terrified, to tell the public the truth. And that is, we got old. We have, about 67 million baby boomers. And the baby boom basically, the quartile as it's defined goes up to about births up to 1964. So you start to see we still have several more years of them moving into their earned benefits. And I want to make sure, we made a societal deal. Hey, you turn 65, you're part of society, you've worked, you get Medicare. You work 40 quarters, you get full Social Security. You serve in the military, you get certain benefits. You're part of a certain tribal group that has a treaty, you get certain benefits. You fall below a certain income, you get certain benefits. Mm-hmm. Our problem now is, okay, how do you pay for it?
Right.
And my brothers and sisters on the left somehow like to throw things, we'll just tax people over $400,000. And it's a complete fraud. You actually do the math and you go, well, that takes care. I think I did one where if we just took every dime for folks over $400,000, I paid for like 6 weeks of borrowing.
Wow.
I mean,
because how many $400,000 income earners are there in America? It's a small number.
There comes, or you can confiscate every billionaire, every single dime they have, and just assume their yacht and everything. You got full market value. And it was, it paid for the borrowing for like a year and a quarter, year and a half. But then there's, the economy's gone and everything else. And we're unwilling to sort of tell the truth. Now, there are solutions, and not a single one of them gets talked about. And a lot of it is within fixing certain problems in healthcare, diabetes, and we'll come back and talk about that more. But there's examples like that where we have these huge drivers of spending, and we're terrified to go anywhere near it. So the political class basically engages in a fraud. The discussion is an absolute fraud. And give you an example. You're a famous talk radio host in the Phoenix area.
Yes,
and
totally.
You have to basically come up with something to talk about for how many hours a day?
3 hours a day.
So 3 hours a day, every
5 days a week.
5 days a week. You're not going to be able to talk about debt and deficits for 3 hours a day for 5 days a week because no one will listen, because either they don't do math in their head as they're driving through Phoenix traffic. So we do shiny objects. It's someone that's really uncomfortable in a beer can. Or the administration's thinking about raising the cost of your mortgage to subsidize other populations, or whatever the shiny object is on cable news or talk radio. And part of my theory is we do that to satiate people's need for reaffirmation of how angry they are, and they should be angry. But it also keeps us away from ever doing the hard stuff. The reality of it is 9 years from now, if you and I got rid of every dime of defense, every dime of government as you think about it. So no State Department, no FBI, no White House, no Congress, no Supreme Court. It's all gone. You still have to borrow hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars. And if you backfill Social Security, because remember, the Social Security Trust Fund is also gone in 9 years, it could be a few $100 billion of borrowing. And there's no government. Your government is an insurance company with an army.
Which is a great line. I want to repeat that. An insurance company with an army. And this gets harder to do because we're getting older. Yeah. So let's walk through that. So, okay, you are 60. You have 2 kids that are under the age of 10, including one that's about to be...
Yes, because I'm pathologically optimistic.
Okay, well, this is perfect to bring that up, David, because if you are optimistic despite this challenge, you mentioned a stat on our radio show a couple of weeks ago, 19 states, we already are seeing deaths outpace births.
Oh, no, it's half the states.
Half the states.
Half the states in the United States already have more deaths than births. In 18 years... this is with last year's or 2 years ago fertility number, so I haven't calculated in the last couple of years. But 18 years, United States has more deaths than births. Are you a dying society at that point?
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily, but you're going to have to rethink what does it mean to grow. We desperately need that dynamic, healthy, amazing, U.S. experiment. The American experiment is just remarkable. Most Americans have no concept how much better our standard of living is compared to Europe, compared to Japan, compared to almost every place in the world except for a couple of the oil emirates. And a lot of that's because sort of the creative destruction, the risk-taking, the willingness to allow us to fail and come back and build things. But as you get a society that gets much older and so much of the nation's capital will be consumed financing the debt, will you have that type of dynamism? So give me an idea. The previous 50 years, you saw 3.5% GDP growth. And what that means is, think of that. If remember when you were in high school and they were teaching the magic of compounding interest. So you get 3.5 today, but the next day, the next 3.5 is on top of that. And then on top of that, we're now projecting the long run growth rate of the country is not 3.5, but is down to 1.8. That is a dramatic change. The first way you think about it is it takes more than twice as long, because remember, you lose the compounding effect. So we've had times in the United States where every 18, 19, 20 years, you're doubling the standard of living. And now we're talking about that not happening in functionally a generation where the quality of life, the quality of things you can purchase, the way you live doubles. Now it takes much, much longer. And you're going to actually lay something else on top of this. The model right now says in 23 years, you have to double U.S. taxes to maintain current services. So, I have a 10-month-old. I have a 7-year-old daughter we've adopted. And my wife is exactly my age. So when they hit, they're not anywhere near their peak earning years. And we will have to double their taxes. They will live dramatically poorer. So this coming generations, probably the next 3 or 4, until baby boomers have sort of moved on, will live poorer than their parents.
Your kids, Matthew and Olivia, are facing a future that doesn't look like the future or the present that we live in now, because it's going to be so much harder for them to get ahead.
And it doesn't have to be that way. I just do not know if modern politics, where back to my previous part of our discussion, where we're much more satiated by chasing the shiny object, the stupid story of today. I've had occasions where I do my budget presentation saying, do you understand what's going on demographically? Do you understand in so many years, 43% of our entire working age? So here's our prime age, and then compare that to the population at 65 and older. I have a world where 40% of my population is 65 and older compared to my prime age population. And you're heading very close to, at the end of the decade, that world where one retiree per two workers.
Which is hard to do that math.
But I do those sort of symbolically to help people sort of understand we're hitting numbers that we weren't supposed to hit for another 15 years.
And not in a good way.
Oh, in a horrible, horrible way. And then with the medical inflation that's happened just the last couple of years, we're just now starting to figure out what that means in our numbers. Give you an idea, in the first 7 months of the 23 fiscal cycle, entitlement spending is up 11%. But when you break it down, Medicare was up 16%.
Wow.
And much of that was just healthcare inflation.
So that's on top of, you go to the grocery store, you see that every time you go to the grocery store. Thankfully, all of us don't use medical services every week.
But what happens when the steak you buy goes up, 7%, but medical inflation goes up 16, 18%. And yet the majority of healthcare spending comes through government.
70% is the number, right?
If you add in everything.
Yeah.
Now it's state, local, tribal, everything else. So it has a government touch to it.
So I looked up Social Security. Back in 1935, when it was signed into law, life expectancy was 61 for us males, 65 for females. Now, the age to get it was 65. So you were living like ancient. You were like at the end of life. Now it's different. We're living to be 80-ish. Medicare in 65, and this is Congressman David Schweikert with us here. Life expectancy for male was 70, 76 for females. Obviously, COVID has had an impact on our age numbers, but we're living longer.
Last year's actuary report, basically, if you had to dig into it, because it was always one of those uncomfortable things to talk about, but there was about less than 6 months variant on adding to the actuarial life of Social Security because a number on the outer end of the curve for Social Security passed away. So it didn't have – it had an effect. What has been more uncomfortable is if you actually look, we just lost a whole year in Social Security's actuarial life. And that was substantially because of inflation. The size of the COLA going up, reaching in and grabbing more and more of the trust fund's cash. And then there's some other things that we're having real trouble with. The number of prime age males who are dying.
Really?
Or
prime age is 25, 54, 25, 64?
Yeah, it's basically we do 25 to 55.
Okay.
And one of my tables uses 64, so you can grab which one you want. But we have, and we also target that we think there's about 3.5 million prime age males missing. We're not finding them in the economy. They're either working in the underground economy, not paying taxes, doing something, or we've lost them someplace. And we're really doing some interesting breakdowns of what's happened. So I know we're jumping around, but this will make a unified theory here in a moment. We're starting to actually see something in our numbers because no one's really broken it down this way. Obesity may be our leading killer, then drugs, then cars.
You mean like drugs like overdose illegals?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
so
yeah. Fentanyl has created a brutal pop in prime age individuals dying.
But think about, I think if I'm going to read this correctly, we're going to have obesity, which if government is responsible for about 70% of all healthcare spending, that's an issue.
You're already heading towards a thought process. So don't get ahead of me.
You've taught me. Okay, I won't get ahead of you. So we've got deaths by obesity and costs with obesity. We've got same thing with drug overdoses and people that get hooked on those, services for treatment, etc. And then we've got cars is the third leading cause of death.
Yeah, and then firearms and some other things within there. So suicides, and there's a great argument that obesity, suicide, some of these things are emblematic of there's something horribly wrong in society.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and this isn't we're not doing a sociological discussion, but
a tough one.
But I have a bunch of articles on that too.
Good.
But right now we're sort of trying to just break down saying, okay, the demographics of our country, our fertility rates are down immensely. We've had a administration that's chosen to leave the border wide open, and don't argue with me on that because. You know, we're in Arizona. I can take you down. I can take you down and show you what's going on. And there's this math that basically says the importation of poverty, you crush the working poor in your own country.
Well, it's competition essentially, right? So if you have, let's say, 10 million working poor, and that's just a made up number, and then you have 6 million new people that are going to compete for those same jobs. That's a challenge. Thanks for listening to Equal Matters. It's a place for us to have these important conversations, which we'll continue with Congressman David Schweikert in just a moment. But first, a question. Are you stuck, bored, feeling unchallenged, thinking to yourself, is this it? Does it feel like life might be passing you by? Well, there's a reason you think this way, and it's not what you think. It's not your boss. It's not the business you work for. It's the voice in your head. It's this voice which leads to fear, low confidence, and self-doubt. But it doesn't have to be this way because you can feel confident, you can believe in yourself, and have the ability to push through fear. So you show up as your best every single day. Hi, I'm Rob Hunter. I'm the host of Equal Matters, and that was me until I created some tools and developed my communication skills, including managing my own internal voice. Master Your Message, my online course, is self-paced, 8 modules, over 8 hours of content that helps you understand your own internal voice and how this internal voice leads to the emotions you feel and how those feelings and thoughts impact how you show up. For only $197, you can go from self-doubt to confident. You can feel in control of your mind, your emotions, your actions, and your life. Master Your Message is also going to teach you how to nail presentations, listen more intently, handle disputes, and how to use different communication styles based on the situation you're in. What you say is your billboard. Broadcast wisely with Master Your Message. Additionally, your relationships are going to improve as Master Your Message is designed to help you open the doors you want to get a seat at the table. Take action now by going to paintedporchstrategies.com/communication. Look, no one's going to do it for you. You got to take action yourself. One more time, paintedporchstrategies.com/communication, or look in the show notes of this episode and you'll find a link right there. Thanks so much. We'll get you back now to Congressman David Schweikert. You have, let's say, 10 million working poor, and that's just a made-up number, and then you have 6 million new people that are going to compete for those same jobs. That's a challenge.
And there is also another quartile that in the United States, you have to hit a certain income level to pay actually federal income taxes at all. Mm-hmm. So half of the working population pays really are almost no income taxes. You pay FICA taxes, you pay your Social Security, Medicare, unemployment, those things. But you actually have to get fairly high up in income before you start covering your societal load cost. Pay enough property taxes to cover your school. Pay enough income taxes to sort of pay these other things. And we never talk about, because as a society many years ago, we basically decided we were going to have a progressive government financing system. And that's just what we do.
And progressive by different rates for different incomes?
No, it just progressive means the more you make, the more you're paying.
Yep.
The more you make, the more you're paying. But there just is not enough income and wealth there to cover our obligations. So as we make sort of the circle of, on one end, I have a society where I'm going to have school districts, even here in Arizona. We have school districts in areas where you drive by and there's new homes. Mm-hmm. And yet, the school district, even when you add in the private students, the charter students, just all the kids available, are actually shrinking. You're going to see that all over the country. The number of students available for education, the number of young people are shrinking.
Get back to our demographic problem, right?
Yeah. So now you move into the tables, and now there's other things where other quartiles, and we give them names, millennials and those sorts of things, don't have the same levels of productivity. Leisure is important, travel's important, personal expression's important, fine. But you don't see some of the same levels of productivity. Then the willingness to do jobs that require other types of skill sets, being a carpenter, being a plumber, those things. But you need those in a society to make your infrastructure work.
Yep.
And then you sort of go up. So we also have a mismatch. And now we're actually going to see some things where AI, and I actually believe that chat GPTs and those things are fascinating to play with. I've had it even write code for me. But there's already some examples of the AI leaping beyond that in what it's capable of doing. The chat bot is fun. There's stuff already out there that's already leaped over that.
An example.
Ones where you can give it levels of instructions and it can just conduct the activity. So chatbot, here's your command, give me something. Here's your command, go do it, and I'll come back in 3 weeks and it's done. And wait till you're able to instruct it to 3D print something, those sorts of things. So are you going to see a disruption in some of that white-collar workforce? I'm going to argue this isn't Armageddon. It's going to be...
You're pathologically optimistic, as you say.
It's going to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
These are going to be sort of quartiles where, a week ago we used to say, go to college, get this type of job. You're less likely to be laid off. Yeah, that may not be so. The world is going to look different. But we need people. We need the productivity. So we don't have a choice. Even if you're uncomfortable with a robot, flipping your hamburger at your fast food place, or you're uncomfortable with someone working from home using an AI to, write their scripts, or when you call the IRS, the person helping you is soon going to be a chat AI, but you can be on the phone for an hour and ask them anything you want, have them help you fill out the forms. Those are actually, from a productivity standpoint, if we're so fearful that the productivity in the United States is going to fall or flatline, these are things that may pop up the productivity if we embrace them and don't demagogue them. But yet, back to my fear-mongering that is modern media, is you will see, go to your cable and AI is terrifying.
Yep. Robots
are terrifying. These things are horrible. Someone forgets to mention the other side. We don't have a choice.
So let's back up a little bit. I want to get to productivity because that's essentially growth, and we need to grow. I want to talk about how you as a congressman, this is your 7th term, how do you work behind the scenes, David, in trying to influence other Congress people, members of Congress, that this is the issue. Time is of the essence, because if you want to be a star as a politician now, you're going to gravitate more towards
shiny objects. It's one of the things, and I'm having to work on this a little bit because I walk around, forgive my language, pissed off all the time.
I watch like most of your floor speeches tonight, that passion to wake up your colleagues.
And 100's talking about is every week I try to do an hour, half an hour. And these are almost like caffeinated economic lectures.
With big, huge printouts.
With lots of charts. And I get some real crap for them. I mean, I've had a fellow Republican member on the Probes Committee threaten to take away my economists. I'm the senior Republican over the Joint Economic Committee, which is a bicameral committee, both House and Senate. We rotate the chairmanship. So this year I'm the vice chair, and Heinrich in the Senate has the chairmanship. But I get like 5 PhD economists. So
attached to that committee.
And then therefore attached to me.
Yeah. Okay.
And just that, and I'm number 4 in the Ways and Means Committee now.
And that's seniority based?
Yeah,
Ways
that
and
is
Means?
seniority based. And the benefit of that is I am surrounded by folks who do math. try never to hire poli-sci majors in my office. Up until a while back, I had a PhD in physics in my office.
Really?
It made sense. We were doing a lot of the math, testing some of the climate change theories and what actually had an impact and what was just someone trying to make money off of us.
Oh, we should do.
So yeah, it was a really interesting. I have some fascinating math and binders on like what happens if you go back and rehabilitate Peruvian rainforests, the impact that has as a carbon sink. So, but these are thought experiments you have to do.
Yeah.
But back to the point at hand. I think most members of Congress know the demographics, the fact are entitlements. They're earned entitlements. People get upset when you use the word entitlements, but you earned it.
It's literally you're entitled to it.
Yeah, but from today through 30 years from now, every dime of borrowing, 75% of it is Medicare, 75% is Medicare, 25% is Social Security if we backfill it.
What do you mean by backfill it?
Social Security Trust Fund runs out in 9 years.
Okay. So 2032, we're out of money.
So the average Social Security recipients will get a 25% cut in their check. We will double senior poverty, which is absolutely immoral. So you can do a couple things. We could actually work on legislation that's complex to fix, raise the income ceilings, provide a spiff if you want to work longer. There's all sorts of things you can do. There's actually some formulaic problems where a low-income worker who works 40 quarters, someone that only works half that numbers but is a high-income earner gets more benefits because the formula never really contemplated those sorts of things of a high-income immigrant moving in. So there's things like that we need to fix. But President Biden made it very clear in his State of the Union, we're not allowed to even talk about Social Security. So all the work of the folks who, in the background, were bathing in the actuarial math are now terrified to do it politically. Because now if you say the word Social Security or Medicare, the Democrats are going to run television ads beating the crap out of you. You have the AARPs of the world, which I think in their hearts they believe they're the defender of retirement, but seem to just believe, we'll just raise taxes. Continue to screw younger people. So you have a world now. In the 1970s, for every dollar it went to a senior, $5 went to young people.
In what way? So
school, children's health care, education. Yeah, this is government money.
Yep.
But today,
but it was an investment, right? That's how those dollars are seen.
No, I would say it was just where the demographics were. So you had this many seniors, this many young people. Mm-hmm. In the 70s, so $1 for seniors, $5 for young people. In this coming decade, it's just the reverse. $5 for seniors, $1 for young people.
Wow.
And you think of that. So in about a 50-year time period, the dramatic flip. And so, the floor speeches are important. You try very, very, very hard to make sure the math is well vetted because you get, the trolls that desperately are looking for something to beat the crap out of you on. But what will rip your heart out is, like I have one of the floor speeches from, I think, late last year. I think there's 1,300,000 views on it. And so it has 10,000 comments. Now, I think half of them are bots.
Yeah.
But you start to dig in, and some of them, you say, well, if we just got rid of foreign aid, we'd be fine, or this. And it's almost like there's a part of the population which is just desperately clinging on to the folklore because the math is so painful. And the math is painful. It doesn't have to be debilitating, though.
And that's important. So, Congressman David Schweikert, you spend your time in your committees, your Ways and Means. What's the other one that you're on?
I functionally chair Joint Economics.
Joint Economics. So these are the issues that your committee digs into. So when you're looking at, I don't know if a way out is the appropriate term, a future, and we talk about your kids again.
In some ways, it's stabilizing debt to the sizes of the economy.
Okay, so stabilizing debt. What I know about the debt now is it exceeds our economic output, if you can count all the debt. That typically throughout history has been a problem for countries. Yes or no?
It's a problem if you have a country that doesn't have the ability to borrow. So if you're Japan, you can have double the debt of the size of your economy, but it's almost internally financed. You have a population that is very thrifty and saves their money, and a government that is respected. You have, if you're, Argentina, they build up debt to buy votes, goose the economy. Then all of a sudden they can't pay their debt, and they go and who's going to buy that debt? It's you don't trust it. So how do you make sure that you communicate to debt markets that the United States is being serious about what's going on?
Right.
And right now we're just not serious.
Which it's kind of like a faith system, I think, right? America is kind of built on this idea, this faith that it's going to work, and the structures are in place. Does that shake because of this?
Okay, it's more, but the reality, it's more than faith. We have an amazingly productive society. We have amazing natural resources. We own the patents and the intellectual property on much of the world's best technology. So we do a lot of things very, very well. We've always had a society that was very industrious. We were a little worried about that level of, remember, you see the numbers. Americans work all these hours and don't take vacations like Europeans.
Yeah.
Well, it's a lifestyle trade-off.
Absolutely.
And oddly enough, that's one of the things we're a little worried about in the younger generation is they apparently want to have a life, which is fine.
You can do both.
But you got to understand there will be a productivity hit that comes to that. So I come to you and you're a member of Congress, and we say, all right, we have this problem. Every day, 10,300 American baby boomers turn 65, and we owe them benefits. Day after day after day after day, we're borrowing $51,000 a second, day after day after day. And we know that we right now are slated to borrow about $128 trillion in the public markets. And that's both the money for backfilling Social Security and paying for Medicare, and then the interest costs of that.
And interest rates are higher now, so that's a factor as well.
So there is a problem if long-run interest rates stay 2% higher than they did in the last decade. In like 25 years, maybe slightly longer, every dime of tax receipts goes just to pay interest.
I have a number here that you talked about in one of your floor speeches that in 2019, interest payments cost us as taxpayers, the government, $376 billion, which for a $4 trillion budget, manageable. 2024, and this current budget year, because of those interest rates, you said it's essentially doubled that cost to service the interest. So to me, I look at that, David, and I see wasted money, right? Like a credit card payment that you don't get anything back for, but the interest rate went up and it's just money out the window.
Look, people want things.
True.
And if you remember Congress, the hallways are full of people, thousands of people who want things. It was amusing. A couple of weeks ago, did a budget town hall, basically showed the slides, walked people through, did my compact version. And the first hand goes up and says, okay, you need to cut things, but I want more money for veterans. And I went to the slide and said, okay, look, but we've raised spending on veterans in like the last 8 years by 191%.
Wow.
And yet the number of veterans, because of the passing of World War II, Korea and Vietnam, the actual population being served is now falling. And he basically said, I don't care. Well, it turns out he works at the VA and wants more money.
Yeah.
And there becomes the problem is we all want cuts. We don't want the additional taxes.
Yeah.
And long as you get more money for yourself. And there becomes the American ethos is the political class says, okay, screw it. If I were to stand in front of an audience and explain how bad the numbers are, for many of these districts, you don't get reelected.
And isn't that the fear? So this is a little bit of a side note. I looked at, and you told me this a while back, you happen to be in Phoenix, Scottsdale, Arizona District 1, which is one of about 30 remaining competitive districts, meaning could go Republican, could go Democrat.
Yep, it's basically a 50-50 district.
So how does that, the gerrymandering as it's called, make it harder to do your job? Because if the fear of losing an election is now a fear of losing a primary, does that mean the parties kind of drift towards the sides?
Actually, in some ways, I can make the argument that the fact there's so few competitive districts anymore.
I really appreciate you making it this far into the podcast for this important conversation with Congressman David Schweikert. We'll get back to it in a moment, but there's another important conversation I want to have. It's about you. Where are you at? Are you ready to grow in your career, but maybe you lack a strategy or vision about how to grow? Does the thought of getting out of your comfort zone freak you out a little bit? Do you have a fear of failing? Maybe you look for some help online. Maybe you read a few books. I've done that too. All of it was great information, but how you transform seems to be missing. So I've got a communication skills program called Master Your Message that is the how. How to enhance your communication skills to grow, understand, and lead. Leaders use communication skills to build strong relationships more quickly, relationships that open up opportunities. Your influence is built around how you communicate. Culture is communication. Disputes get resolved through communication. Decisions are made more effectively when the communication is precise and on point. Leadership is also built around communication because you have to clearly be able to state your vision, to create understanding, to create buy-in. You do that by using language to influence. Influence is how you create stakeholders in your vision. Influence is communicated. So your ability to communicate directly relates to your leadership abilities, and enhancing your communication skills gives you a competitive advantage. Hi, I'm Rob Hunter. Again, I'm the host here of Equal Matters. I'm also a communication and performance coach. With almost 30 years of broadcasting experience, I help you as a leader enhance your communication skills, skills that you will be able to use to your advantage. You'll be able to use these skills to lead, to influence, to build a strong team. So let's schedule a 20-minute call to find out if coaching is right for you. Here's the best way to get started. Go to paintedporchstrategies.com/Rob. You'll want to click on the one-on-one coaching button to schedule your free 20-minute call. Again, paintedporchstrategies.com/Rob. If you got to pause the podcast and do that right now, make sure you take care of it. Or look for the link right here in the podcast show notes. Let's get you back now to Congressman David Schweikert.
So how does that, the gerrymandering as it's called, make it harder to do your job? Because if the fear of losing an election is now a fear of losing a primary, does that mean the parties kind of drift towards the sides?
Actually, in some ways, I can make the argument that the fact there's so few competitive districts anymore, it should make it actually easier to do much more difficult policy.
I would think.
Because these are bulletproof Republican districts.
Right.
These are bulletproof Democrat districts. They could hold hands, do something that's difficult on save Social Security. Because remember, it's immoral. We're going to double senior poverty in 9 years and do something. And they're in districts that are so overwhelming, they should survive. It's idiots like myself who have a tough district. But I'm also blessed. I have one of the best educated districts in America. So, and it's very entrepreneurial. So I will do events where I get people that say they don't like me, they don't like Republicans, but at least they know I'm telling them the truth about the math. And what's so evil, though, I do see out there, is you'll see candidates running, I'm going to protect Social Security. And then, okay, how are you going to do that? I'm going to protect Social Security. Okay, how are you going to do that? I'm going to protect. And you realize it's a great slogan, but understanding the complexities, Social Security over the 75-year, and yes, we use a 75-year actuarial window for Social Security, is $202 trillion short.
And that's starting in 2023 going to basically 2100.
Yeah.
Okay. and an aging population that's going to require.
Well, it gets a little trickier because as the baby boomers, lifespan, as we pass on, then all of a sudden some of the numbers come more back in balance. Now you just have to deal with that huge debt buildup.
You got to climb the hill, the mountain.
So in many ways, much of the presentations we do is people say, well, balance the budget in 10 years. And you show them, I can balance the budget in 10 years, but you're going to have to cut Social Security or Medicare or veterans benefits, those things. And you will have to have wiped out all government, plus defense. They're all gone. And they look at you like, well, that's crazy.
That's the
but
math.
It's because the math got so ugly so fast. And rhetoric that we used back in the 90s doesn't work today because the math from the 90s doesn't work. That was before the retirement cycle, the baby boomers.
So why are you working on these issues? Because I've met many politicians throughout the years in doing this. Very few have wanted to tell the truth. Why are you?
Because apparently I'm an idiot.
That's what I'm getting at.
No, it's absolutely disingenuous for anyone who runs for public office to sit around and talk about the shiny objects over and over and over. It's good politics getting elected, but I will argue the systemic threat that takes down a republic is ultimately a debt crisis. Because the way you solve a debt crisis is not an explosion. The wheels don't come off. The person trying to sell you gold or this and that at the next moment, may be a really smart investment for long term because of the inflation side. But it's societies that have hit this and were unwilling to do what we call fiscal consolidation. We'll talk about that in a moment. They don't necessarily blow up. What you do is you inflate your currency. You just turn on the printing presses and you pay for everything with the printing presses. Now, what you're doing is you're paying the value of the dollar goes down, the value of the dollar goes down, the value of your savings goes down, the value of your house goes way up. You create these massive distortions, but you're able to pay for the debt by stealing everyone's money. And the way you steal that money is you set off inflation. A little bit like what's going on right now. This is the first taste of it.
First taste. So there's more coming. There's second, third, fourth courses coming.
You'd have to turn the printing presses on turbo.
Mm-hmm.
And if we, that is how governments in the past have gotten out of a cycle where they can't do a policy decision. There is some literature out there. You can take a look. Both Australia and Canada got themselves really upside down in previous decades. I mean, really upside down. And their formula, if you read into it, it was like an 85-15. 85% fiscal constraint, 15% new revenues or additional revenues, but that 85% spending constraint was very controversial.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the protests going on in France right now. Mm-hmm. Just because they're trying to move the retirement age just a little bit.
And it's like 62 to 64.
Yeah.
It's not like it's 62 to 72.
Yeah. And yet it come close to almost bringing down a government.
Yeah.
And so you start to, when Western politicians from all over the industrialized world look at that and go, wow, so that's what I'm in store for.
That's what as a we the people, that's what I think about. I'm like, okay, so I'm 45 and I think about, okay, how much longer am I going to work? What's going to be there for me
forever?
And that's what it seems like, because as a voter, right? Someone who votes every 2, 4, and 6 years, I have been fortunate enough that this is my gig. I get to research these things, so I have an understanding of which direction I think the country should go fiscally. But since no politicians, other than say you and a few others, talk about these, how do we get educated enough to go, wow?
Yeah, and what enrages me, so back to being cranky all the time, there's a number of members who will talk about how dangerous the debt is, but they won't look you in the eye and say, and Medicare is the primary driver of the debt, because that really upsets people.
Sure.
But it is the math.
It's just a fact.
It is the math. Now, there are some things we could do to disrupt the crushing debt. And here's where I just get so frustrated, because it's almost like we're institutionalized to the point that here's the math. Do you see certain things? The math should speak to you.
Yeah.
If you dive into the statistics and the math and really, really work it, it should speak to you. And the thing it's screaming at me is it's healthcare. Healthcare cost is the primary driver of U.S. sovereign debt. Now, healthcare costs because we got older, also the lifestyle, particularly young males, but other populations becoming obese, and the health, the crushing health things that happen with that. So what would happen? So we're doing a math set, and I don't have it all done yet, because we need to like triple vet this one, because this one's going to hang me way out, is these new GLP-1s, these appetite suppressants.
Oh, yeah. So the Ozempic is one of the main
example.
brands.
And there's a couple, I think there's one that's older, not as effective, but dramatically less expensive. There's a new one that's really expensive, but may be remarkably effective, and maybe only an oral or a single shot a month. But the concept of what would happen if you turn to your Medicare populations, your Medicaid populations, your Indian Health Service populations, your veterans populations, the other populations that government pays for, and say for those who are morbidly obese. And why you come back to this is 5% of the population is over 50% of all healthcare spending. 5% is over half. Now, these are people with multiple chronic conditions. These are people who really suffer.
Yeah.
But if you get down into the tables and look at it, much of this population is morbidly obese. Mm-hmm. And with that, other crushing things happen. The diabetes, the cardiac issues, the other things. And so we're trying to say, what would happen if you could cut obesity in half in the United States over a 10-year period?
Trillions in savings.
Potentially. And we don't think that way. So would you change the farm bill? So you grow different things so that you don't have to process as much. Would you change nutrition support? So instead of giving someone a EBT card, which is sort of the modern day version of food stamps, and say you can go buy onion rings with it. No, instead we're dropping off a box of microwavable healthy food. We're going to work with you to understand your blood glucose, these little things you can put on your skin. There's actually a future Apple Watch. It looks like it's going to have blood glucose monitor in it, to the GLP-1s. And then by the end of the decade, very, very good chance, because it's in phase 1 now, there'll be a stem cell treatment that's sort of universal. They've designed one that doesn't require anti-rejection drugs, so you can do one common line. You could get those people whose bodies don't start producing islet cells again on the production of insulin. You could reactivate their bodies again. What would happen if I could make the argument this is moral? It may be the single most powerful thing you could do for income inequality in the country. Rural poor, urban poor, some of my tribal populations that are just crushed by diabetes. And so you could make the morality argument. These are populations that are just what we eat, how they eat. And it's more than just sticking a needle in someone's arm. You're going to have to do an all-in approach. But by the end of the decade, it could be the single most powerful thing you could do to stabilize U.S. debt to the size of the economy. And with that, one of the things we're trying to model, and this is complex math, is, okay, we already see some math that says it could be the most impactful thing I can do for income inequality in society, but also it would bring in so much more population that could participate in the economy. We also might get a GDP, size of the economy, productivity pop. And so I'm trying to make this argument. there is a unified theory here. The unified theory of debt, it's substantially demographics, the health cost of that demographics, the fact our mortality rates, our fertility rates. Now, what can we do to disrupt that? And what enrages me is we have really good math. The math keeps getting stronger. And I give speech after speech and presentation after presentation, and I almost get people to come lobby against it.
Well, it's there. You're going to take away some of the government taxpayer money they get.
Remember
right?
our rule, money, power, vanity. But you would be shocked. So many people think the battles in Washington are liberals versus conservatives. It's often, no, it just happens to be this spending program goes to conservatives, this spending program goes to liberals. That's why they fight over it. It's about the money.
Yeah.
And some of the greatest examples are when we did telehealth. Telehealth may have been the most lobbied against policy. If it weren't for the pandemic, the expansion of telehealth was never going to happen.
And why is that? Because it requires me, currently, to go to my doctor's office and hang out.
It was less. I have to give the medical community, they weren't the sinners here. But it was often the group that invested in the real estate under the urgent care center.
Yeah, so less traffic.
The Wall
less
Street
value.
group that came to town and bought up all the emergency rooms. And their argument was, well, you're going to cut down the number of people walking in the door. Oh, no one's going to be able to figure out how to use telehealth. They're not going to be able to use the button. And obviously that wasn't true. And now you go back to previous part of this conversation. What would telehealth look like if I legalized technology? The thing you can blow into that identifies you have a flu virus.
Wait, that's illegal. So healthcare innovation is in some ways illegal.
Because you have the algorithm for it to be disruptive, writing the script.
Is this AI or separate?
That doesn't matter. It's more of an algorithm. Remember, we misuse the word AI.
Yeah, okay.
But because an algorithm say, okay, it's this, you can calculate.
Because it can have all the data that it needs, right?
And then bangs off your medical records, knows you're not allergic to a certain antiviral, and could order your antiviral. And you could have an avatar on your phone that you're talking to that's run by a chat bot that's the world's leading expert in viruses. We have all that technology today. But government chooses not to reimburse it. Many state licensing says we're not going to let that algorithm write a script, a prescription to you. We're not going to allow a pharmacist to fill that prescription to you because it would disrupt the economics of healthcare. But the wheels are coming off. I mean, seriously, I cannot express to you how hard it is seeing into the future of how we're going to finance what we have today. We're going to have to disrupt it, but that's a good disruption. Totally. The fact of the matter, you can reach into your home medicine cabinet. You have something that costs you $190, so it's expensive.
Like a coffee machine.
But you blow into it, and you have a breath biopsy at home. And for anyone, it's going, well, that's sort of crazy. Do you know someone with diabetes? They have a pump on their hip, talking to their phone, analyzing it, the algorithm saying, okay, I need to dose you. That's an algorithm dosing. Mm-hmm. So it's already existed for a decade in society. But somehow we didn't pay attention. Oh, for diabetics, that made perfect sense. But how about for the mom that has a couple kids at home and trying to get into the pediatrician or the urgent care center or those things? It's just so disruptive. Blow into this. We know you have this. And Lyft is going to drop off the antiviral in 2 hours at your front door. There is this argument that you could crash the price and sort of step up productivity because of the disruption in life.
Which is what we need. So let's get into pro-growth policies because this is something you specialize in. And I always like to point this stat out because I don't think it comes up very often. To my knowledge, Congressman David Schweikert, there's 5 times the United States has cut taxes. All 5 of those times, revenues to the government actually went up. Tax receipts went up.
Look, you got to be careful. There's certain tax cuts, and this drives the left insane, but you can demonstrate where you got pops in productivity or pops in repatriation or pops in economic activity.
And repatriation is like if I'm Rob Hunter Inc. and I'm based in Paris, France.
Yeah,
the United States tax rate's lower. I'm going to come back and be based in Phoenix.
And there's more than that. We gave you ability to bring your book of business back, and you got to pay a lower rate. But what we really cared about is you also brought your patents back, because many of those patents you have reoccurring revenue on because you sell the use of those patents to lots of other companies. And we could see that is we have far exceeded corporate tax receipts. Than we ever expected when we did the December 2017 tax reform.
Which you were instrumental in helping it run.
One of the most interesting years of my life. and people, the problem is you get folks, the tax cuts cost this much. And they're absolutely duplicitous when they say that, because saying, okay, that was the book view, now do the dynamic scores. And the unwillingness of my Democrat colleagues saying, but by the following fourth quarter, tax receipts were already up.
So in less than a year.
In less than a year, tax receipts were already up and beyond. And could you imagine going into the pandemic if we didn't have that level of economic vitality? But I can give you other examples. And I'm going to throw this one in. It's not non sequitur. It's more how bad so many of the policy sets from the left are. Do you remember net neutrality?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so during the Obama administration, we need to control the internet. Okay, so we had net neutrality for like 1 year. And the capital expenditures on the pipes, the ability to move huge amounts of data, crashed in the United States. And then this guy named President Trump comes back in. He puts actually sort of a pro-market person head of the FCC, and all of a sudden the investment goes spiking way back up. There's some great models out there. If we had had net neutrality from the Obama administration to when the pandemic hit, you wouldn't have worked at home because the internet would have been so damn slow.
Wow.
But it's an example of, and yet what happened is there were such huge investments put back into the internet and the fiber and the pipes. Do you need net neutrality? Is anyone slowed down or those things? So it was once again that left's desire, well, we need special carve-outs for people we like, who contribute to us, who say nice things about us, and give us money, instead of a market approach saying, screw it, throw everyone in, make them compete, and watch the capital investments.
Because isn't that, when the market gets to dictate, it's we dictating. So it's like, okay, we as Americans have decided we like this product or we do this.
Well, yes, and look, at some point it's about the future rate of return. We'll spend money on this because we see where the future is.
Sure.
Like there's one of the absurdities in the Democrats' Inflation Reduction Act, which is an absurd name, because we can, the Democrats at first were saying, well, this is going to be positive on lowering the deficit because we had all these new taxes in it. And then the amount of spending they had compared to the revenues. Okay, it's not a deficit reduction bill, but it took us 6 months to finally rescore it and find out we'd been lied to. But do you hand someone a subsidy to do something they're already going to do? They're already going to buy this car that happens to be, battery powered. Wonderful. Did it change your decision to purchase it because we handed you a subsidy? And then the economics say, but most of those subsidies actually got consumed in the price increases in the car. Because if you're already selling out every unit,
right?
Elasticity, you remember your high school economics, basically saying, oh, screw it, I can raise it by $7,500 because they're being given $7,500 from the government, so they don't care about that, and I have sold all my units anyway, so raise the price. There was a number of things like that. It's almost like working with people who didn't show up at their high school economics class.
Probably true.
So sort of back to our unified theory. The debt is going to take down this country. Now, it doesn't go boom. There's not like, a French Revolution, the world comes to an end. What happens is at a certain point, Federal Reserve, Treasury, Congress will just basically say, we need to turn the printing presses on. And we'll devalue the dollar. Then foreign governments and foreign investors and foreign banks and all these others will say, screw it, we don't want to hold U.S. dollars. They're debasing the currency. Remember, that's why when you hear people say king dollar, the strong dollar, that's the argument that if you are defending the dollar, it gets used everywhere. There's demands for it. But if now the only way I can finance my debt is I have to print my own, you set off a horrible cascade. So you will make retirees, anyone trying to save, you're just going to make the country much poorer. And you basically will live like a very slow growth, middle European country.
And is this what happened to them, Congressman? Is that sort of model France, Greece?
To the credit of most of the EU countries, they've actually demonstrated in many ways much more fiscal discipline than the United States.
No, they really? That seems silly.
But there's more to it. So when I came and we just did the obesity diabetes part of this discussion, there's dozens of ideas like that where you could disrupt the cost drivers and push up productivity. How do I get the idiot class, the people, the elected class. Sorry, I couldn't help myself there.
This is why you make good friends in Washington, I'm sure.
and I don't mean to be a jerk. It's just so aggravating.
But it's like wake-up time, isn't it?
But how do you go to these folks and say, all right, you guys can hack away budgets, but I can demonstrate you can get rid of everything, and unless you're bending that healthcare cost curve, doesn't matter. You can't cut enough. Right. You just cannot cut enough. Medicare continues to skyrocket. Remember, once again, 100% of the next 30 years of debt, 75% is the shortfall in Medicare, 25% is the shortfall if we backfill Social Security. The rest of the budget, it actually has a small positive balance because we historically have been holding most discretionary flat. Now, there's a whole bunch of stuff in government I think we need to get rid of.
Absolutely.
I can come up with a few $100 billion like in 20 minutes. and there's all sorts of agencies. I could actually take much of our regulatory and say I can build you a model where you crowdsource. All right, there's going to be slightly a non sequitur, and if anyone really gets bored, it's a little hard to find. I did a YouTube video like 6 years ago. Schweikert environmental crowdsourcing. And the concept is, okay, so you want to build a motorcycle paint shop because you're that type of guy. You're an artist. And so you got to go get an air quality permit. You got to hire an engineer to check your scrubbers in your paint booths. Every year they got to come in. You're going to do surprise visits. You're going to spend all this money on that. And so after 6 months, you finally get your air quality permit for your motorcycle paint shop. What would happen if you say, you don't have to get a permit, but we're going to, in our community, have several thousand people with the little air quality sensors Bluetooth attached to their phones, driving around. And if you screw up, they're going to catch you almost immediately. And instantly, the folks from the county air quality are going to show up at your door and say, hey, you screwed up. Or here's your ticket. Here, shut you down. But it would be a model that says it's living data. It's crowdsourced. Because today's model is I fill out paperwork. I pay a filing fee. I put it in a file cabinet downtown. Does a file cabinet full of paper make air quality cleaner?
No.
So you could file all that and then be screwing up all you want until the inspector's coming and then you hit the button and your filters work. So the idea of a living, and you never catch the guy who's painting cars in his backyard.
Right, exactly.
Without a booth.
Because he doesn't have a permit, never applied.
And so they escape. So there's this concept of if you could crowdsource air quality, well, why can't you do that with financial markets? Why can't you do it with so much of wealth where we have these office towers full of people filing paperwork instead of a living crowdsourced data model that instantly catches bad actors. And that way it would be much easier to start a business, make a transaction, do these things, because the friction is when you cheat, you get caught.
Right.
So instead of the 1938 model, because remember that our regulatory model basically was designed in 1938 to using, I mean, how often do you use like Waze when you're driving in a city and, there's lots of traffic and you're looking for alternatives? Because there's all these data points.
Right.
So there's arguments, there's models that say the most powerful thing you could do for urban traffic is actually not more roads, it's better data. The synchronization of the lights.
Oh, my goodness. It drives me crazy.
So the lights know when a school's letting out. They know when there's a ball game. There's no, when a fire truck has been issued, when an ambulance is moving. The living data turns out is the most powerful thing you could do actually for air quality, for the movement of traffic. And yet we're resistant to do it because someone over here wants to sell asphalt.
Sure. So we have a built-in structure that lobbies against changes, but the optimism, back to your pathological optimism, is what has America always done best if you look at our history, especially since World War II? Innovate.
Yeah.
Come up with new things.
But my fear is Congress has become a protection racket.
Yeah.
But it's not a protection of incumbent members of Congress. Matter of fact, we've had some of the highest turnover ever in the last couple of elections. It's protection of bureaucracies, protection of business models. When the CHIPS Act or these others, where they're willing to sort of say, okay, we want to live on these huge grants from government. We're going to blame China. Saying, give us all this money and so we can compete against China. But now government hands you, $14 billion, but tells you what to do. Oh, and also, by the way, you have to have daycare and diversity and this and that. But it also now just made whoever's handing out the grant one of the most powerful people in America. Because you have – so instead of saying we're going to fix the tax code, so you invest in whatever disruptive – technology makes you incredibly productive and you can beat the pants off everyone else and you're willing to take risks. Instead, we did a grant system. It's almost a type of soft nationalization of many of these industries. Well, think about it. In just the last year, we've done a soft nationalization of the chips industry, of the solar industry, of the electric car industry, of the battery industry, because you need now the government grants. And it just enrages me that people care so much more about what they think is free money, even though it's borrowed and your kids are going to pay for it or your retirement's going to pay for it.
Sure.
And so these are the distortions we have. So now you got to show up at someone's office in the White House and show them your grant proposal and deal with their political idiosyncrasies.
When I was in D.C. in September, when we saw you, we were in the back of a cab, my co-host Mike and I, and it was a Lyft or whatever. And she was telling us she had just, previous that day, had picked up some people at the White House, and they were talking in the back seat about an initiative they just got money from to tell poor people not to use their ovens to heat their homes. Like this was a big, and the woman, she said, I grew up liberal, and the more I hear things in D.C. driving these cars, the more I'm like, wow, the level of stuff that the government is involved in is like obnoxious.
Yeah, and for anyone listening, you got to understand, if you ever want to have a political conversation, go get an Uber, Lyft, or a taxi cab in D.C. because you'll hop in and, the very nice gentleman from Ethiopia who will explain his favorite injera recipe, which I actually make my own injera.
You do?
I love Ethiopian food.
There's a couple of good spots in Phoenix where we live.
Yeah. No, Lalabella is one of my favorite restaurants. The family are wonderful. But back to the point, you'll get in the car and they have NPR on, then they'll have Bloomberg on, and it becomes sometimes, when they figure out you're a congressman, one of the most interesting conversations between here and there.
I bet. But, you got to keep in touch with We the People somehow, right?
Yeah, but I still, back to almost the opening of this conversation, I can demonstrate to you that the ecosystem of information now is about shiny objects, reaffirmation, the pumping up of rage. It's not actually about what's going to take down this society.
It's always money, right?
Does my little boy, 25 years from now, should he live in a country where his taxes will be double what you and I pay?
No.
And yet, I will talk to liberals and say, well, we'll just raise corporate taxes and taxes on rich people. And you bring out the chart and say, it doesn't get you anywhere near what you need. And they look at you and say, well, then your charts are wrong.
No.
And so we almost have this math denialism.
I read a stat a while back, Congressman, that it was in the Journal, Wall Street Journal, and it said, at current rates, if we taxed everybody at 70% of their income, we would match it, but we would kill productivity because there would be no point of going to work if you had to give up 70% of your money to someone else.
Yeah. I've seen versions of that and I've actually done a series of floor presentations showing what the different marginal tax rates. But you sort of have to demonstrate that it doesn't get you where you want to be, and you'll get a liberal's immediate reaction is, well, we used to have a 70% tax rate. What they forget to mention to you is the things you could deduct. So, okay, I'm a high-income earner in the 70s. I have this incredibly high tax rate, but I got to deduct my car, my meals, my trips, my guest house, my vacation, my this. I mean, so the reality of it is the best way to think of tax receipts, we don't call them revenues, they're actually receipts, is since the 16th Amendment, you have to make some adjustments for depressions and major upheavals, but you take a look, the government always gets about 18.5, between sort of 17 to 20 and 19% of the economy in tax receipts. 18.5 seems to be sort of the mean. So we've had times with very high marginal tax rates.
Yeah.
And we're getting 18.5% of the economy in tax rates. We've had times where we've actually had fairly low marginal tax rates. And we get about 18.5% of the economy in tax receipts.
Interesting.
So the secret there, if you want more tax receipts, you want more spendable money in government, bigger economy.
Right, growth.
The way you get more tax receipts is a bigger economy. If you shrink the economy and you're still only getting 18.5%, 19% of the economy in tax receipts. And there's some there's some brilliant literature out there saying, well, they raised taxes with the goal of getting up to around 21%, and the economy shrank or flatlined, and you fall right back to that 18.5%, 19% of the economy coming in your tax receipts. And my fear is we're actually even seeing a little bit of some of that now that some of the parts of the 2017 tax reform are starting to roll off because they needed to be renewed. And we're actually right today seeing a major fall in capital gains taxes.
Oh, because that went up, right? It was when you guys passed 2017.
No, there's more to that. The Democrats are actually trying for high-income earners moving up the capital gains to ordinary rates. But you have a problem in capital gains, and that is much of your capital gains is inflation.
Oh,
if you were to go sell your house today, let's say your house was an investment, so you're not doing your once in a lifetime, those things. How much of that gain is inflation? Because if you're going to go buy the house next door or another house,
you're no further ahead.
And that's the point. The capital gains was supposed to be a capital gain.
Right.
You built something that was more productive or more efficient or had a special value, so you sold it, you got that value. Most capital gains today is inflation.
Wow. So there's a lot of math that you get to do, a lot of directions to point, pro-growth. So if we have a demographic challenge, I'm going to try to sum up if I can, and please correct me, Congressman. So we need to grow. So let's go back to the paperwork filers who are doing permits. Now, if you could innovate, you could take those people and get them other gigs so they could produce more stuff, so people could buy more stuff, so the economy could grow. You can add robotics and AI to certain places. For example, I just read Wendy's is going to use, in certain locations, they're going to test AI at the drive-thru so their employees can go do other things. So that's a good thing. We've got pro-growth policies in place, kinda. What else do we need to meet this?
I'm going to take it a slightly different direction. I want you to picture in your head two circles.
Okay.
These are Schweikert's version of the unified theory.
Got it.
So we're not going to talk about string theory and graviton waves and those things. We're going to do one unified theory is the economics. We need to grow like crazy. Have to fix immigration. Don't have massive importation of poverty. Have importation of skills, and skills could be a skilled carpenter,
sure,
as well as an electrical engineer. It's what does society need, and that's actually going on around the rest of the industrialized world. We're getting our heinies kicked right now by the rest of the even Japan has opened up its border and started to bring in high skill workers,
which they had traditionally been against.
Yeah, but they don't have a choice. Remember, they're
saying
their fertility rates are just. I mean, countries like Singapore are down to like 0.8.
Wow.
The fertility rate they have to bring in. So you fix immigration. You fix my permitting model. You fix the adoption of technology. You fix the outliers in the tax code. So you want a tax code that maximizes economic growth to maximize receipts. And there is this, as some people refer to it as the Laffer curve. There's others that are a bit more complex because they hit all sorts of different types of global taxes. And you actually need a tax code that's living. You don't pass it and then say, we're going to keep it for 30 years because countries and technologies and other things you deal with change.
So that's why you guys put expiration dates on it, knowing...
That and the real reason for the expiration dates is because you have to do it in a budget box.
Oh, okay.
So because we had to do it through something called budget reconciliation, which is a whole nother show. But there's also other things and at some point we'll talk about a border adjustment tax because we're one of the only industrialized countries that doesn't use a value-added tax where taxes are stepped up. So much of the rest of the world screws us over when we export to them. They put a value-added tax on it, but they refund it when they send us things. So there's this huge tax arbitrage the rest of the world has.
It seems an unnecessary step or 5?
Well, but if you fix that, if you made it so there were taxes that were sort of equalized of we send a widget to China or they send us a widget to here, they have the same tax loads, I will argue much of that manufacturing leaves China and comes to the United States. It's a tax policy problem.
Interesting.
But so in my first circle, it's all the policies that maximize economic growth and do it in this really efficient way. The second circle is the one that deals with our population issues. We're going to get old as a society. It's just what we are. So how do I create incentives saying, if you want to stay in the labor market, you don't get penalized. So, you're 70 years old and you're happy, you want to keep working, maybe we should give you a spiff, give you back part of your Social Security. You don't have to pay that tax.
Spiff is what?
Right now, Social Security taxes are what, 12.4? How about if you only the business side was paid, the employer side, not the employee side?
The extra 6+%.
Yeah, so you'd stay in the labor force. But because part of that demographic curve is a major disruption of the cost of healthcare through cures. Here's one of the punchlines. One of the models we're working on, it looks like approaching almost 60% of Medicare spend will have some relationship to obesity, diabetes, or Alzheimer's.
So we know the challenges.
So Alzheimer's is really difficult. We're not making nearly as much progress as I dream we would. But diabetes, we know how to take on. We could, so what would happen if the way we deal on our population unified theory over here is we stop financing our own destruction. We also, for young males, what's the hell's going on out there? When we actually see males and females entering universities almost the same, and in some universities, females are graduating at double the rate.
Wow.
Which means you have this huge marriage gap. Marriageable males, you're a female, you have your bachelor's, your master's. Are you going to marry the guy who didn't graduate?
Right.
And so family formation, children. But there's all these things here. Some of the solutions are somewhat obvious. They're just politically uncomfortable to talk about. And Congress, in its current intellect, is able to do one little thing here, one little thing here. And my argument is, like on the economic one, you got to do the tax, the immigration, the technology, the bureaucracy, all these things, and do them all at once.
You have to update government.
Major update, policy-wise, but you got to do it all in a package.
Yeah.
Because it wouldn't be enough to say we fixed the parts of the tax code where we're going to have lots of people invest in growth, but you don't have the workers, or you don't have this, or you don't have that, because they all fit into each other. They're like Lego blocks. You need each of them to build that tower. It turns out the same thing on the population demographics of, work on those curatives, produce those incentives, use the new big data AI models to get through the phase 1 trials dramatically faster so you can bring disruptive drugs to market faster. You allow lots and lots and lots of the new technologies to produce pharmaceuticals. The majority of what we consume in pharmaceuticals are off patent. You realize there's ways you can 3D print drugs now. You don't need a $100 million facility. You could actually dramatically disrupt pharmaceuticals and their pricing and their purchasing, and allow you to, I'm going to be on hypertension, calcium inhibitors or calcium blockers my whole life. It's the same drug, everyone. Why can't I just buy it from the manufacturer?
Right.
Why can't I just buy a year's worth of it? I'm going to take one every night.
Great point.
And you start to rethink those. So some people say, well, get rid of PBMs, fine, or get rid of this, parts of the pharmacy, or get rid of this. My theory is, screw it. I want an environment where if it's off patent, everyone can make it.
You want an Amazon approach, right?
But no, because Amazon itself in some ways is a monopoly. I want everyone competing with each other, and that becomes the market.
Absolutely. And then the costs go down because I'm trying to get an edge, and I can do it faster, and I'll invest in it.
In some ways, it's beyond that. It's also the convenience. 16% of healthcare is people not taking their drugs like they should.
16%.
16%. So that's almost $600 billion this year. This year, 16% is someone, I didn't take my statin. I had clogged arteries. It drove me into a heart attack, or I stroked out. Or I didn't take my hypertension medicine. I stroked out. But if you take that stupid little pill every day, so a pill bottle cap that beeps at you.
Time to take your
pill.
pill.
So 99 cents, or the app that beeps at you. So that's 16%. Then there's an article out there in The Economist last week that talks about that 10% of healthcare costs may be overprescribing because you have multiple drugs using the same neural pathways and then conflicting with each other. So there's even an interesting percentage, and I won't quote it because I don't remember it exactly, of people diagnosed with Parkinson's or Alzheimer's that it wasn't that disease. It was they had drugs that were interacting.
And it messed up the pathways.
Exactly.
Okay.
So, look, you're never going to get all the 16 over here and all the 10% here. But what if you got half of it?
Yeah.
Those, that's $500 billion a year.
Right.
But this is what I'm talking about on the population is be willing to embrace disruptions that make society healthier and cure more cures. And if you do those sort of two, here's my productivity to grow the economy. Here's my productivity to lower the price of healthcare and services. And the seesaw moves in the direction you need it to move.
How do we help you? So most of us, I think, people that I talk to, voters, care about the country, feel lost, feel like we're powerless. So is there a way that we can help, Congressman?
Start demanding that your elected officials treat you like an adult.
I would like that.
I think it's one of the ways I get reelected. I accept sometimes I'm a bit abrasive and I don't mean to be. It's just like drink far too much coffee. and I will get people to say, I don't like you personally. You're a little too hyped up. But damn it, you were right on that math. And when I get that from a liberal audience, it's one of my greatest moments in life, because you start to think, because how much of what we just really talked about is truly Republican or Democrat?
It's not.
It's smart economics,
Yeah.
and it's curing a disease or lowering the number of our brothers and sisters who are pre-diabetic. Is that Republican or Democrat? It's just really great economics, and it's also moral with a really good societal benefit. So my begging of folks that actually care is stop getting trapped by today's stupid subject. So-and-so said something horrible about so-and-so. And for the next 2 weeks, that's the number one story.
Yeah.
Or you put someone that's creepy on a beer can, and we talk about it for the next... Sorry, I didn't mean to use the word creepy. I'm just trying to be a little dramatic here, trying to get us to think.
Yes.
And so that becomes a lead story for 2-3 weeks. Stop being fooled. Stop buying the shiny object and start demanding when the political class or even the news you read treat you like an adult.
What is the best way to get that message to your congressman or woman so that they would actually go, oh, okay, my constituents do want me to tell them the truth?
Throw out just a straight question is, okay, if diabetes is one of the single biggest cost drivers of government in the United States, what's your solution to disrupt its cost? You can almost do it in a single sentence.
Without having to be a jerk.
And forcing them. The problem is you really will find, now here's where I'm going to go a little ideological. You'll find my friends on the Democrat side, we're going to build more clinics. Screw that. It is not moral to make it easier for people to live with their misery.
Right.
Cure the misery, which we're on the cusp of being able to do. Force the political class to see the disruption is the solution.
Would you come back and do some more with us?
Oh, we have some other subjects we should actually cover into.
Indeed. We do. Thank you.